Taylor Edelstein here with James Daniel McTague, talking about empowering your life with love. Middle of February. Dan and I also, we do a kind of a year-long meditative focus on the sun's movement through space. And this time of the year brings us to a lesson in what's called obedience. So that is also part of where our focus is.
Is that what we're in? Obedience?
We just moved into obedience. So the month of February, it's a series of 3 things you focus into. And the first being self-control, the second being self-reliance, and the third, obedience. And what I've kind of come to this year and looking at it is the obedience is to those things that precede obedience, to self-control and to self-reliance, because it's within yourself. And what good is it if you're not empowering yourself with love? So just to include a few other things, Dan, throw a curveball at you today.
I can see that. It's not a question of me, are you throwing the curve at? It's as if it gets a foul ball into the stands and bangs off somebody's head. Yeah, the book you're referring to, or the story you're referring to, is that by Mabel Collins, called When the Sun Moves Northward. And Mabel was a great esoteric theosophist of the end of the last century and the beginning of the 20th century. So it's a fantastic explanation about how to empower your life with love. That's what the book is about. It's a small book. And it relates to the cycle of the year, moving from southward to, or from, when the sun moves northward from going as far south as it does. In the winter solstice, it shifts and then it moves north, and the rebirth of love, or the rebirth of the spirit of love, life back into the world begins. And it starts as a little child and grows back into the fullness of the summer solstice. It's the renewing of life every year. And Easter, which coming up next, really, is the point at which that bursts out in the world. And that's the resurrection of the world, so to speak, which relates to the Christ consciousness, relates to love. Now, what we're talking about today, if Taylor will allow us to go into that subject, but you can come back to this anytime you want to, Taylor, because you like that sun moves northward story. What we're talking about, or we're looking at, and it's relevant because we have to make the bridge from where we are right now to where we're going. Because the idea that spirituality stands still is an illusion, of course. It's not any such thing. There's no Bible that casts a final story. There's just various Bibles that get written by various groups along the path of human evolution and development that tell the current story. And the current story we're in right now is a fantastic chapter in the human story. And we have to get this story right in this chapter so that we can live our way through it and then live into the next chapter with what we need. And we entered this chapter from a position that really existed before the start of Christianity, which was the birth, life, and death of the Christ in Jesus' experience. Before that was the Greeks, the Greek and Roman moment, the moment at which a really serious and intelligent attempt was meant to develop our ego or our personality. How were we going to live in the world as a self without any connection? Because before the Greeks, there was a lot of interaction. I just remember the oracles of Delphi were in the Greek cycle. And before that, there were lots of relationships in the Egyptian cycle to Horus and Ra and those things. And there were cycles in the Hindu to Krishna and other groups. And there were all of these cycles that went on before the Greeks and following the Greeks, the one we're in. But what you look at, if you look at it from a certain point of view, is a constant declining of the ability to interact with the living presence of spirits in the world around us that are not in dense material form. Some bigger, some littler. In the Japanese, you have the Shinto shrines, which if you've never been to one, are like mini shrines. They're like might be 20 of them in a big Shinto shrine. And each one is a sort of nature spirit, the spirit of poetry, the spirit of health, the spirit of job working, and various things that we're talking about, all of these little nature elementals that could help them. And we can say, oh, that's some sort of strange fantasy. No, it's not. It's old. It goes back to a time when they had a sense of helpful spirits. And then the Buddha shrines came along and replaced those, and there was a sense of being able to contact greater levels of experience in the spiritual world. So then we came to the Greeks, and the Greeks had lost by this time humanity, not just the Greeks, but humanity in general, and all the tribes and all the places in the world that we have it, these were fading away. The world was crystallizing. It's becoming more material. It's becoming denser. It's actually becoming smaller in a sense as it contracts. And that pulls humanity with it down onto the material world. And we began to lose an inner sense of contact with, first with spirit. In fact, in the Christian church, the Catholic Church, it even became a rule of the church not to talk about spirit. Now, ask yourself, that's the source of life. So what happens? Because they're people too. They may be ordained priests, but whatever they are, they're people. And if they're losing contact with the ability to connect with that level of spirit, then they don't want it discussed in the story. And of course, the secular world out there never cared about spirit anyway, because it didn't care to deal with what was invisible. If it's not material, we can't see it, taste it, touch it, measure it, forget it. Well, that might not be all there is to life. So the Greeks really saw this coming, and they were incredibly intelligent. The Stoics, back in about 300 years before Christ, made a serious attempt to develop the intellect of man to the point where we could reason our way into a satisfactory way to live if we're disconnected from any greater sense of influence. They didn't want to be slavishly obedient to some Jehovah or other named god, Zeus, or any of those characters, which is not to say they didn't exist. They didn't want to be beholden to any of those and have anybody interpreting for you or them what that being might want, because that leads to saying, guess what he told me to do today? Or guess what he told me that he wants you to do today, which is more to the point. So they wanted a system that freed themselves from that sort of tinkering. So, and out of that comes an ethical way of living, ethical reasoning, how to reason a life that would allow people to live together, function together, be ethical with one another, and carry forward. And out of that really comes all of the psychology and existentialism and all of the things that are brilliant minds trying to examine the theory of how that's going to work out for us and what it means. With exceptions in the midst of all of that, like Kant and other people that are in these existentialist movements that have their own deeper ideas of being disconnected. Some weren't comfortable with being disconnected from a source. Life in the body wasn't enough. It's just because we feel like we have a sense of connection. So that's one way. And the ego, the human ego, is really developed out of that, in my view. Before that, we didn't really have human beings talking about their egos the same way. It was kind of, they were who they were, and they were acting with their desires and their interests, but the concept of your own separative ego being a structure of yours with elements in it, like emotion and thought and physicality that are a unit, that was something that kind of was developing. but it was developing separate from and independent of any greater outside authority, including your soul or your spirit or anything inside of you that comes in your package that you weren't conscious of because your external senses didn't inform you of it. Just like the external senses of mankind were not informing us about greater beings that may live in the larger environment in the inner world, we're not connecting to that in ourselves. But the Greeks aren't going to give up on living just because they can't find any of that in themselves or out in the outer world. So they develop a system. And it's a good system. It works pretty good if people get together. And Plato, who is a fundamentally master of group living, that's why he wrote Republic. How do we get together and live together as a group under that theory or idea? And is it going to fall apart? And any way they went at it, it kind of fell apart. It kind of ends up somebody having to regulate, because you have your idea of what that looks like and other people have their idea. So they were working to form governments which sort of tell the citizens how they have to conduct themselves. Mm-hmm. And the Romans, who really kind of invented the concept of citizenship, if you were a citizen of Rome, you had power. You were respected as a Roman citizen. So they kind of brought citizenship into the picture. And these are all positive developments in humanity going forward. Then something happened. Christ happened. Golgotha happened. The birth of Christ happened in a human being. Now, it's one human being, so it isn't like 50 human beings. It did as a group all of a sudden, which would have been way more spectacular and would have given a lot more confidence to the groups around them. It was one human being. And when you think about love itself as an individuality coming down into the world to join the human race and enter someone, there aren't very many human beings that could probably withstand that kind of an impact on themselves. So I'll take one if one is all we can get. And unless you are Jewish, unless you follow the culture and recognize how devout this culture was to its spiritual heritage, we wouldn't realize what kind of a person this individual was, who's a 30-year-old Nazarene man who has deep, deep spiritual convictions about life and God and living. Anyway, he has it. It happens. And this starts a new cycle going, a cycle in which the ego, the self that was being developed, which is the rudimentary personality structure of us, now has something else to work with inside of us, which is this concept of love. Now, what is the major difference? And this is what I want this today for you to think about, Taylor, and tell me what you think about it. There's an enormous distinction between what the Greeks were cooking up and later on the existentialists and the people who said this is what the self is, and what happened with the Christ experience in the cycle of Jesus. And the difference is immense, but it's not obvious unless you are empowered the way that Jesus was. If the power of love is in you, meaning the energy, the living energy of love, which is functionally the spirit of love, if that's living in you, with you, and you're in a positive, receptive relationship to it, you're not hostile to it in you. Well, if you're hostile to it, it won't be in you, living in you dynamically anyway. It'll be walled off in a closet somewhere. But if it's in you and living in you positively, powerfully, then the aspects and attributes of love itself become yours. And because we haven't had that experience of that living in us, we haven't felt the kind of potential that could give us. Now, Jesus knew the potential because he was doing some pretty remarkable things because of that relationship of what had entered him at the Jordan River when John baptized him. Baptism being a connection between our heart, basically, and that consciousness. So it dropped into him. And when it did, suddenly he had its gifts to add to his own gifts of an intelligent ego, an intelligent willingness to do good and be socially positive and help humanity. That was the great positive gift of Jesus, is his willingness to do whatever he possibly could at any level, at any way, to help humanity relieve itself of suffering. That was his gift, his great gift. And all of us have that gift in us. We look around at the suffering of humanity right now, and we are sick of it. We don't want it in our life, and we don't want it in anyone else's life. And if we ask ourselves closely, we don't even want it in the lives of the people that we think are real shits in the world, because there's a lot of them. But they've been led wrongly, and they've been informed badly, and they've been hurt badly, and they have reasons to be shits towards somebody, towards something, towards God even. So we don't want them suffering either. We want them to come to peace, and we want them to come to love and come to a realization that they don't have to harm anything to live on the earth with others. No one does. But you don't know that if you don't know the power of love, and you don't know the power of love if you don't let it in. So this happened. Now, you see, we got two things going on here now. You've got the Greeks talking about the right way to live with others, and then you've got the Christ talking about this power of love, which is a group power, because love loves everything equally. No favorites, everybody gets it, and you can use it. Now, what's it giving you that you didn't already have? Well, the first thing is none of us are really good at turning water into wine, so we know that transformation and transmutation are demonstrated gifts. And then there was that poor guy. I think it was the second thing that Jesus did. That poor guy that's by the pond. There was a pond somewhere. I forget the name of this city. And he shows up and asks some guy that's lying on this rickety bed next to this pond and says, "What's up?" And the guy says, "Well, I'm paralyzed. And I'm here because this pond, there's a spirit," and we don't know what he was talking about, but something was happening here, and there were people everywhere around there. And he said, "The spirit shows up every so often, and it stirs the water." And that's symbolic of spirit stirring the waters. And when it does that, it charges the waters with a certain kind of energy. They don't know who the spirit is. They don't know why it's doing it, but they know that when it happens, if you get in the water, you can get healed, but not forever, not everybody. So then he said, "I can't walk, so I'm lying here on the bed, and when the water gets stirred, everybody rushes down and jumps in." Oh, human beings are just what they always were. So those people all jump in the water, and they suck up all the healing, and I can't get any. So I've been lying here for like weeks. So that's the second situation that Jesus comes upon, and he goes, "Okay, so let me give you a hand with that," and relieves him of the disease. So now we know the transformation, transmutation, and grace, which is the healing property of love, when it pours into us, it just chases out whatever it is in there that's causing ill health in the body and reforms whatever the necessary atomic structures are that healing happens. So off he went about the countryside for 3 years, talking to people about this agency that the Christ presence was offering humanity, and develops a group of people who kind of like the idea. And then sort of it kind of started waning a little bit, and people kind of lost a little interest maybe, but he finally gets the church back up because they can't do these things. See, unless you take on this love, you don't have these properties. And the church, the local church, the Sanhedrin and the priests, Pharisees, I guess, whatever they're called at that time, they are praying to Jehovah. They're praying to an outside agency Not saying it's not real, but their relationship to that outside agency was their power to do things. But here comes this guy along, and he's cranking out these demonstrable values, but not by connecting to this outside agency, but by connecting to that which is now living inside of him. Now, this creates a lot of argument, doesn't it? What's going on here? And it would create the same argument today, but it would be probably louder. So is this really the next step? Is this the next step in human development and evolution? Figuring this out and relating to it and having it? Is this a miraculous thing that happened because some vast God of love in the universe that is the whole thing comes down and joins us? That sounds a little peculiar. So this argument comes up, and the powers that be, which were the Romans, which had their own gods going on, they didn't seem to like that idea very much because it felt like competition. And the local Jewish priests didn't like it much either because it's making them look bad because they can't duplicate this kind of effort. And they didn't know how to listen to this young man telling them they could do the same thing. And so it turns into a crucifixion. Long story short, you got to go. And when you're gone, we'll speak well of you later. But we get to keep in power, and we're not worried about anything that may go with you. So it was a risk. It was a risk to, certainly to the disciples, to, if you're going to kill this guy that brought this to us, then maybe we'll lose it. Maybe it will disappear. And our ability to link to this vast spirit of love and have it living inside of us and have its values of transformation, transmutation, grace, all that. Not to mention eternal life, conscious eternal life in harmony with all of the rest of the universe. These are big promises for love because it has the ability to connect us to all other living things, great and small. So off we go. But the thing that happened is it didn't disappear. It actually multiplied itself through the disciples all over the planet and sort of sank down into the human race and kind of became quiet because we weren't really good at what Jesus was good at, which is saying yes to love. We didn't know, we had it in us, but we didn't know how to say yes to it. We didn't have any framework for that. So 2,000 years have gone by, more or less, and we have become more crystallized, more materialized, less conscious of anything other than the material world. And now we just hold little material things in our hands and scroll 6-8 hours a day down the rabbit hole for various reasons. And that means that we have reached an actual lowest point of human. You remember the old, you've seen in the textbooks in school, humanity starting over here with a little monkey kind of guy, and then he goes forward and he gets more upright and he gets bigger and bigger, and pretty soon he's standing upright, and pretty soon he's looking really cool and got flowing golden hair and ready to go. Well, that's not kind of how it went. It's just how we project that by digging up a bunch of old bones. Sort of like that, because we did get better and better looking. I certainly did. I don't know how you're holding up, Taylor, but we've improved our physiology. We've improved our psychology. We've improved our health dynamically when we're in, not because of not at old age and stuff, but people were dying at 40, 35 or 40 in the earliest days, back in the almost lost memory days, a few 100,000 years ago, a million years ago. It was a rough go. So I think by getting more intelligent and getting more conscious and getting stronger of living in a body and having more intention of how the body should go, we had more impact on it. And eventually we turn out a pretty good product overall in the human race. Some different than others, and some stronger in certain abilities than others. Some groups are smart, some are not as smart, some are physically.
Greg's here.
What's up?
Oh, I apologize. I have a unexpected house guest joining me.
Oh,
Let him
okay,
know I'll
that's
be right
fine.
out. Yeah, I apologize. But no, I'm following this story. I'm tracking with you, and part of the difference I'm seeing here is that it seems as though rather than us always striving upward, what you're talking about with the Christ consciousness descending, it was like it descended down to where we are and put it here rather than, this Buddhist idea or these things that they're always out of reach, it kind of was out of reach. So perhaps that's not exactly what you're trying to get across, but that's what I'm
No,
kind of
that's certainly
hearing.
part of it. And
Okay.
and I don't want to. If you have to take care of your guest, you're welcome to go do that.
I do apologize.
Well, yeah, it's okay. But the difference here is what comes down to where we are, and the idea of us trying to get up to where it is. You see, that creates some kind of weird illusion of the universe that up there is better than down here, or that the opposite of low is high, and
Right.
that throws us into this whole world of opposites of good and evil and right and wrong and love and hate and God and man. But actually, it's all one thing, and the descent of perfect love to man is a descent of the personality of God, which is what you would call Christ consciousness, to the human personality, which means you don't have to evolve yourself up and up and up and up and less and less and less and less physical to have that. It's kind of like you can make a lateral movement.
Mm-hmm.
You can stand right where you are and look into the fire of the light and power and potential of that consciousness that is pure love itself as life, and you can let it in. You can let it into Taylor. You can let it become a part of your coexistence with it. It's the creator of you anyway, in the end, which is what the point of the conversation was with Jesus, where he said, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. He's speaking as that energy. He's not speaking as himself. He's not talking about the personality of Jesus. That was the receiver of the gift. He's speaking as the gift. The gift itself is speaking. And it's saying, we are that. We are the
switches
one.
your direction, right? It's like instead of looking out.
He left.
Let me. I'll be right back, Dan. Carry on.
Yeah, we will carry on. It's okay. And we're not going to tell you what we said while you're gone. So, thinking about this for a moment, if you look inside yourself and you realize this is where you stand. Where you stand is where you are in relationship to everything in you, your inner senses, embracing the idea of all of this. And it's welcome back. We talked about you while you're gone. I hope you didn't mind it. But what I'm talking about here is look around inside of you. You have your position, your posture in relationship to these things is what it is. And that's right now is where you look for it. Not in a book, not in somebody's advice about it, what it is in you right now towards those things. And because our inner senses, our inner sense of sight and inner sense of taste and touch and hearing isn't wide open, it will someday be if we encourage it. But if it's not wide open, then we're like, well, does this even exist? Because I'm not feeling it. I'm not getting it. I'm not seeing it. Well, like the
I think you
Zen
nailed
Buddhists.
it. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh,
No,
well, I think you nailed it when you said it's about that receptivity, because as soon as you're not getting it, right, you're projecting that onto it. As soon as you do that, it cuts it off. and you
Right.
switch that to receptivity and you focus on that, then all of a sudden the whole dynamic, that subtle little
Well,
shift allows for you to start to open up in that way.
I agree. You start receiving. Well, when you receive, you have a sensation of reception. You have a sensation of impact. So now the question is how, if you receive that and let it in without having to judge it. See, the place of judgment is in the mind of the experiential self that says, what's good for me, what's bad for me. I have to judge that before I eat this, before I drink that. Not that we do. We eat and drink every damn thing that's toxic, but we're sort of like, let me try it and see what it happens. But we're taking things in or we're not taking them in. And depending on who has told us, don't take that in, it's bad for you. Take that in, it's good for you. We have that going on in us as well. So it's hard to just stand flat-footed on the ground, look within yourself at the inner universe, which is where love lives because it entered into us, and say, show me yourself, and then be receptive to that showing. Now, let me experience you. Let me sample this. There's nothing wrong. It's like a See's candy store. It's okay to go in and ask for a sample. They expect you to buy something, but you don't have to, which everybody does. They just go in and get the sample, and then they book it on down to the beach or wherever they're going. But they're used to it. The Christ is used to it. Love is used to it. So call it forth. Deal directly with, not through the mind, through the senses, directly with it, sample it, see for yourself, and then decide if you want to continue the investigation and the activity. You have free choice. That's why the whole thing hinges and turns around free will. The circumstances of the planet drying up around us and making it harder for us to reach those wet regions where spirituality or higher vibrational being lives, by it coming denser and more material, it seems harder to reach that. But that's okay, because it reached us. It's right there. It's right there with us. And the difference between connecting with it and opening a relationship to it and empowering yourself with love is everything that we hope the future to be. Because transformation, transmutation, grace, and the ability to create in harmony with that which creates the entire and sustains the entire universe is a pretty good deal. That's a good bargain, especially when there's no charge. The only price you pay is giving up what you thought was real for what is real. And that's confusing. So that's a struggle, but life's a struggle. And the suffering of man is really fundamentally based on the confusion of what is and isn't love. That's about it. Because the absence of love in your life generates the suffering. The increase of love in your life generates everything you hope it to be. So that means the solution is pretty simple. If someone sends you a package in the mail that says this will change your life, open it. We can just set it on the piano and never open it because we don't know what's in it. Might go off, might be a bomb. Or we can do some investigation, take a look around, see what happened to other people that got the package and did open it. And some of it was like, well, that didn't look right. And then we realized, well, the packages are different kinds of things, and some of them are packaged by certain kinds of religions, and some of them are packaged by certain kinds of philosophies, and it leaves us looking at the whole thing like, maybe I'll just leave the damn package on the piano or toss it in the trash. I know that feeling, but we don't have to do that because we don't need an authority. Love is an authority of itself. It knows itself, and having been the creator of all in the universe, knows us. So you can set that all aside and you can deal directly with it. You can deal directly with the energy itself and ask it, what do I need to know here to make this an experience that I can trust, or experience I can decide to increase and expand? How will I know love? Not believe in it, know it. Because by knowing it, I can add it to my game.
Well, that's what I was going to speak to just for a moment, was
So
with that directional shift, for me personally, the directional shift that is kind of helping me with this empowerment of love in my life is, rather than looking to, become love or something, I look at it becoming me. So it's like a complete shift in the way you identify as it, rather than trying to identify with it. It's like you're not giving yourself up to it, or at least that's where my focus is, directionally speaking. Instead of looking out, I'm trying to become this loving person. I want to be filled with love, and I want to demonstrate it, or I want. Rather, it's more of a directional shift to look at myself and see love coming into that, just like the story goes with love descending down into Jesus. It's kind of like that same directional shift in my experience. I'm sorry, I know I'm helicoptering, Dan, and it's annoying, but for me to get around an idea, sometimes I have to spin around it myself a few times.
I get it.
To get it clear.
I get it. Well, okay. So what you're demonstrating is for people and ourselves is the two sides of that very simple equation. But the two sides of the equation, you receiving into yourself. See, this goes back to the Greeks. The Greeks were very interested in the idea of self. They don't want to give that up to anything. They're getting to the point where, look, we spend a lot of time coming to the realization that we have a self, that we can be somebody.
Right.
And there's a thrum in our heart when we think about that. It's the same as the song, fast car.
Right.
I feel like I could be somebody, be someone. So you just disappeared on us, Taylor.
I just cracked the door because it was rattling.
That's right. I get it. It does that with wind. You're in Hawaii. So this idea of being someone we like that. And this fear, there's an anxiety in us that something may take that away from us.
Right.
Well, the last thing on earth that's going to take that away from you is love. Love would never do that. And that's why it has humility, absolute humility towards the human race. It never, ever violates human free will, never forces itself on anything, always requires, doesn't just later talk about it, it actually requires you inviting that progress forward. And at any point in the cycle of progress of you and being empowered by love, you decide this doesn't taste good, feel good, look good, you can banish it. And it's gone in an instant from impact in you. It'll return in an instant because it never leaves you. Actually, because it's everywhere in life. Love is life. That's all life is love. So you can banish it from your consciousness, from the way you think about things, but you can't tell it to leave the universe, or the universe would fall apart. So this idea of bringing it into a cohabiting relationship with you, which gives you its powers, humanity needs these powers, the powers of transformation, the powers of transmutation. It needs grace. We need it. And it's available to us as a gift by the being that is the source of it. And its personality is materializing in the universe, on this planet. It's materializing. It's becoming a human expression by its own willingness to enter with our suffering. That's why it becomes a mystical story. So it's like, that's got nothing to do with forming a religion. Nobody have to form a religion about that. If someone meets you on the path of life and says, let me help you, You don't have to stop and say, can we form a religion around that? No, I'm just helping. So it's okay because a religion is supposed to be designed to be, by the nature of what the word means, is a reconnection of us with that which already is, which is, in this case, love. So if it's a system that helps us reconnect with that, then I would say it's a decent religion. But if it's a system that perverts that, or in some way gets it screwed up and doesn't really connect it with us, but connects it with something else other than love, then what good is it to us? And now you can be part of religion, a priest or a lay person, and you can be concerned about having a good religion available for humanity, and you can spend your life fixing your own religion into something better than it already is. Now, I don't know how good it was in the first few 100 years of Christianity, but it did spread all over the planet. But then people by that time were in charge, and they formed groups and organizations, and they made decisions about their religion, and they were already forgetting the event and coming up with things that they thought were maybe improvements on the story. I don't know. I'm not a Christian scholar, and I'm not a person who wants to perfect the Christian religion. I don't think that's necessary, because love is here, it's present, it's available. And I think the next cycle of love and humanity, based on the materialistic world we've created, will be a very scientific process. We're going to develop. Yes, it's going to be practical, experiential, scientific, and it will bring us into an understanding of our relationship to this vast inner world of living being. And when we add that to our material life, we don't become a slave to it. We remember every, or neither do your kids. And you remember every day that the purpose of your material life is to learn how to express love in a physical way in the world with others, and in a spiritual way, and in an inner way, and an energy way, and all the ways that are possible. And
it's challenging. It's challenging.
Well, what does it challenge?
Challenges you to your core, challenges me to my core.
Yes, the core of what?
Because every time you feel violating that in yourself, it impacts me. It's like what our friend Jack refers to, and I think he got it from the Buddhists, is adding that second bad. You instead of just stepping back, but one thing that's really, let me elaborate a little. So you do something, and then all of a sudden you feel bad about it. So it's like firing a second arrow, right? You fire one arrow and you miss, but then you just keep firing, you keep missing, right? Instead of just redirecting and recalibrating and just letting that go. You don't have to add that second misstep to things, right? You just let it go. But as soon as you start judging yourself for it or beating yourself up, it's like adding, you're digging your hole deeper. And one thing that's helped me in the process of not doing that, which has been a process for me, is taking 100% responsibility. So no matter what it is, whether it's I didn't like the way somebody reacted to me, or I didn't like the way that something just occurred in life, I take 100% responsibility for it. And then all of a sudden it pulls me back into center, where I can allow my relationship to love to be present in what's going on. But as soon as I take that second arrow, however you want to phrase it, it leads me away. And then it snowballs. It's like, 'cause then you feel bad about not living it. And so what I mean when it's challenging, it's all an internal challenge for me, but I'm just sharing it because I've been working at this a while, and that's my experience with it. So
okay, well, what that shows me, I mean, how that lives in me, and I agree with you. And to clarify that for people who, it's a very great concept, the second bad. But it's hard to get your mind around it easily the first time, because once you make a mistake, and that's the story of the human race. Talk to Adam and Eve about it. So the thing is that once you make a mistake, what do you do now? you either create a negative spirit-killing thought or feeling towards yourself for having done it, even if the mistake is great, even if it's a serious mistake. Slamming the door and causing the cake to fall is a mistake, and you can get mad about it, get angry, or and beat yourself up because you knew the cake was in the oven and all that, and you slammed the door. And you take a deep breath and you go, okay, I got people coming for dinner. I don't have time to make another cake, so I guess I'm going to have to call it, give a new name to this cake and call it something else and throw it away or serve it to them. The second bad is taking even a second, even a pause, to judge yourself for having done it negatively. You have to behold what you've done. Oh, shit, I just caused my cake to fall. Okay, that's a lesson I'm going to add to my learning. And because I'm sort of a dullard, I'm kind of a hard-headed person, I have to collapse a lot of cakes just to get the lesson embedded seriously enough that I can walk through a door, smell someone baking, and have it register in my mind, they may be baking a cake. I better not slam the front door. So that's a high state of human connectedness to do that. But if I walk through and swing the door behind me and it slams and you hear a scream from the kitchen and you just collapse someone's cake, now what are you going to do? Now it's someone else's cake and you're in their house, and so we feel the necessity to apologize. We feel the necessity to remind ourselves what we could have done better and differently. We have to face it. And taking responsibility is the ability to respond. You have to allow yourself to respond nakedly and openly with love towards whatever the situation is. And let yourself change by that exposure. There's an old expression which says receptivity is the key to time. And you think, well, what the hell does that make? That's, write it on the bathroom wall or the subway wall or something. But it's true. If you allow yourself to receive the full impact of what you have just created, then you allow yourself to change towards love, towards something that would have prevented that. So, but if instead you go, oh, shit, and you start beating yourself up in front of others as if they wanted you to beat yourself up, which nobody does. You flattened their cake. Now you don't have to flatten yourself over it. So if you pause for that moment and let it receive it, be receptive, then change and transformation with love can occur. But the moment we turn into ourselves negatively, we push love away because it won't do that. Love never ceases to love you. But if you cease to love you, then you and love have just parted company. You just dropped holding hands with love and you picked up holding hands with somebody who wants to beat you up. And so the second bad is a departure from love, to abuse yourself for having made a mistake, which love doesn't ever do. So that's why the second bad is so bad. It's a separation from love, which you don't have to do. Now you can come back to it and say, okay, I'm tired of beating myself up now. I don't want to do that anymore. And it's like, okay, they're your bruises. You'll heal up. So consider the concept. And it doesn't mean never apologizing, never saying you're sorry or any of that kind of nonsense. It means just holding yourself in a constant state of receptivity to love, no matter what you see yourself do. Witness yourself, but do not depart from love's witnessing with you. Love will witness you, even when you do things that are terrible, and never abandon you. We think because love would not harm something dramatically, kill somebody, should you do such a thing, that love has abandoned you forever, because that's a pretty major thing. It's a serious crime. Or do something that causes great harm or injury to another. Now you've got a reason to hate yourself for freaking ever. and you're never going to forget it. You did it, you did it, you did it, you did it. There's no reason to turn your world into a horrifying journey, abandoning love because you did something wrong. You made a mistake. You got overwhelmed with anger. You got overwhelmed with fear. You got overwhelmed with something, and it pushed you into an action that later you can't undo. This happens every day to a lot of people. That's the first bad. That's a major bad. But that's not a separation from love. That can be a complete joining with love, permanently, forever, and lasting through eternity if you turn it in that direction. If you turn it in the other direction, you can feel you don't deserve love. Love's going to bail on me. I'm going to throw myself into a hole and fill it in with dirt. That's what we do. We are that way.
Failure. Yeah.
I'm a failure. I'm a complete. But you see, if you didn't have love, this is the last major thought I'd like, is we can throw too many thoughts in the pot. Mm-hmm. If you don't have love as an already living thing in you, you don't have any conscience. You don't have any registration that I really shouldn't have run over that person. It would just be, oh shit, I ran over a person. That idiot shouldn't have gotten out in the road. So you see, the ability of a human being to register something as quote unquote bad is because we already have love in us. So you turn to love and go, I'm sorry, I didn't have a strong enough relationship with you to prevent that from happening. Let's increase the strength of that relationship. And then let's do whatever we can to redeem that act, to make that act whole. And some acts you can't make whole, you just can't. I've been through enough war to know that things that are done cannot be undone by me. But that doesn't mean love can't undo them. We really don't know how love can work in its tremendous potential of inner powers until we merge with it. And I don't see us raising the dead anytime like Jesus did, but resurrection is the theme of the story. So the hope of the world is in love. The hope of humanity is in its relationship to love. And at the Love Foundry, it's just a question of following a few logical steps, materialistic steps, practical steps that you would do if you were doing any job. Adopting a posture in relationship to love and then acting consistent with that posture to bring it into your experience, and then act on it in your experience in such a way that it goes through us and cements us into that experience with love. That's, in a nutshell, what any human being can do, regardless of who you are or what you are or where you've been or what you've done or all your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth bads, because we just keep adding onto it when we get caught in that train and we get into guilt and negation and self-hatred and all the things that happen to us. Just stop that train and get the fuck off it, because it's taking you nowhere you want to live, nowhere you want to go. And I look, you can do this. I remember I got stoned on pot one time and I got on a freeway, and I'm an amateur. So I got on the freeway and I'd smoked this thing with some friend of mine, and I just go, and pretty soon I'm looking out the window and I'm thinking to myself, what was that off ramp I just passed? I have never seen, Stevenson Street. I wonder where that is. And after a while I realized I have no clue what freeway I'm on or where this road is leading me. So finally I just came to my senses and said, I've got to get off and turn around and go another direction, because otherwise I'm going to end up in freaking Albuquerque or somewhere. I don't know how long this is going to last. This was kind of dumb. So we don't have to stay on the train. You can stop, turn around, get on another train, and head directly towards where you want to get off, the station you want to get off at, where this tremendous positive self-affirming energy joins you with the way you know it's love in you is it's so brilliant and radiant and pure that it can't be anything else. And your intuitive consciousness tells you that's real, that's love, I'm in. That's it. That's real, that's love, I'm in. Now, where do we go from here? Well, choose it. Choose it again. Choose it again. Keep choosing it until it breaks the glass, till it moves inside, till it becomes a coexistence in us. And take a deep breath and start. It's that simple and practical. It's not, I got to go through all of these mechanizations to be worthy of love. You don't. You've already earned it. You've earned everything. And your free will is what breaks the glass, and love doesn't take it away, because it wants to turn that free will eventually into freedom, complete freedom. Now, how do you have complete freedom? You have complete freedom in the universe when love and you are absolutely inseparable. Is that one of yours?
Sure is. Come say hi, Liv. Hi.
Howdy.
I'll have to check it.
How are you, beautiful? Haven't seen you for a while. Have you grown like a couple of inches?
How are you, beautiful? Get the thumbs up. It's about all you're going to get. She's shy.
Well, she can't hear me either.
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. How tall are you?
Like 5'6".
Okay. Are you going to slow down anytime soon?
Not unless I start drinking coffee.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. Good to see
You
you.
got stunted. Bye now. I'll look over this, sweetie.
We'll let you loose. Go back.
Well, thank
anyway,
you so much.
We're just looking at this difference between the disconnected ego and an ego that chooses to connect itself to the energy of love itself, which brings it down onto the physical earth in us and makes a co-shared experience. It's nothing against the Greeks. They were doing what they had to work with. But 300 years later, something shows up and says, now we can take what you have done and we can add what's going on now, and we can make something that turns a human being into a rocket ship. So, and that's 2,000 years ago, and now we're at a moment of time. It's all like an enormous V. We started back here in sort of like in a watery world with full awareness of all of these strange supernatural things that could say, don't drink that water, that could say, that's okay to build a town here, that could be helpful to us because some greater spirits than us care about that. But then we become less and less conscious of that as we go down to the bottom of the V, and now we're experiencing a total material experience. But what's here with us, what came and joined us in our materialization process, the greatest release from that in the universe, which is love. So it's an amazing story going on here. Buy in, step in, take a piece of the action, and let's see where we all go together, because otherwise, think about the consequences of that at the bottom of the V and not going up that ascending side, not becoming open to and fully exposed with and taking down into ourselves the breath of the universe. Love is the breath of the universe.
Are always high.
They're always high for humanity. And there's a reason for that, which we're going to talk about the next time.
Okay.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, anybody who is looking for a transformation.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, guys.